It's really strange that as time goes on, saying that The Last of Us isn't really a great game has turned from a very controversial take that would net you the fury of so many people on the internet into a take that is so mild that people on the internet would only lightly brush them away, like dandruff on your shoulder. Perhaps people have over-exaggerated the greatness of that game, and perhaps after getting through all the emotional bits, people look back on it and thought that there wasn't really anything special about it. I personally think the game is just fine. Not bad, not good, just fine. It's adequate for my enjoyment, and I do think that the praise that the game got was quite overwhelming. And thanks to the level of praise that the game got, a lot of people cannot wait to see what the sequel, The Last of Us Part II, offered. Would it offer the same intense and brutal gameplay? Would it offer the same bleak but emotional storytelling? Or would it cause a lot of fury from even the fans of the original? I wouldn't really care either way though, because this is not a story that I'm personally invested in, and I wouldn't care about being spoiled about what's gonna happen next. But just because I don't concern myself with the plot of the game doesn't necessarily mean that some of you don't. So I can assure you that there won't be any spoilers in this video because the plot isn't the main point of concern. If you want a discussion about the leaked plot, assuming that it's real, then this isn't really a place for that. The point of my concern has to be directed to the people at Naughty Dog and the game industry as a whole. I've talked about video game developers suffering from crunch quite a lot of times before in the past. It's terrible that a lot of these video game developers get to crunch, and it's ridiculous that it's a common thing that is happening amongst the Western video game developers. There are quite a lot of expose being made towards Western game developers and their grueling work hours. You name them, they're probably gonna have them. This is an issue regarding the incredibly poor management that's been going on in the gaming industry, primarily the Western gaming industry. Unfortunately, as consumers, there's pretty much nothing that we can do because all we care about are the products that these developers make. We're basically like the really mean teachers of our school. They don't concern themselves over how many hoops you have to take to make your homework or how many dogs that have shred them. All they care about is whether or not you finish it, and not finishing the homework is one way to get into the teacher's bad side. As consumers, all we care about are the products that the people make. As long as these products are in our possession, as long as we have a good time with those products, why should we concern ourselves over the fate of the developers who overwork themselves for our enjoyment? And that's unfortunately the sad reality of the entertainment industry. The sad reality is our enjoyment is their suffering, and their suffering is something that we cannot fix as long as we're the ones who are enjoying those products. And even if we're actively trying not to enjoy something coming from corporations who have unfairly treated their developers, there are still gonna be people who are enjoying them anyway. That's just the nature of a mainstream product. To put it simply, we are more gamers at heart than we are activists at heart, or at least I am to some extent. There are times where a game developer's actions would make me to completely lose my interest towards the games that they're developing, but I do recognize that not every game developer will have a continuous streak of good actions. Not every game developer is this saintly being that can do no wrong. However, some of the wrong that they committed are enough for me to not support them in any capacity. Some people can be more sensitive and straight up not support them for just one mistake. Some people are less sensitive on this matter to the point where they might not even have the slightest bit of concern and still enjoy the game for what they are. This brings me to The Last of Us Part II. Again, we're not going to be discussing what's inside the plot of the game, so for those of you who are concerned about spoilers, this video will not ruin your enjoyment of this game, which will get released a lot sooner than expected anyway. What I want to talk about instead are the things that Naughty Dog has done to truly made one disgruntled employee to leak the entire plot of this highly anticipated game. What I want to talk about is whether or not all of this story is enough for you to be convinced and not buying The Last of Us 2. I suppose the best way to start this entire conversation is through how the first Last of Us game got so popular that it brought the team who made The Last of Us to be the front and center of the people at Naughty Dog. It's kind of interesting that the story of this one feels very similar to Telltale, who also made a post-apocalyptic game that received universal acclaim and sold incredibly well, that they pretty much made their entire game library to be either more Walking Dead or more Walking Dead with different stories, characters, and universe, turning them into a one-trick phony that didn't work out very well for them, as we all know. Just like The Walking Dead Season 1, The Last of Us got so popular and received so much critical acclaim that the team behind them are getting so much praise. I think the game received way too much praise because it gave the people behind The Last of Us team way too much power. Whoever is behind Naughty Dog really loves the team who made The Last of Us, to the point where it even defines Naughty Dog right now. Keep in mind that these are the developers who used to make the Crash Bandicoot games, but they couldn't even be bothered to make the remasters. They left the remaster of both the original trilogy and its card game to other developers. And let's not forget Jak and Daxter, a game that is slowly fading away from people's memories. Now, what does that say to you? What that says to me is that Naughty Dog is way too focused on making their narrative-driven games, and I can't exactly blame them because that's what got them really popular in current year, and not a lot of people are interested in Crash Bandicoot these days, or at least compared to The Last of Us, but I think that's gonna be their downfall. They're gonna keep making these Oscar bait narrative-driven cinematic games with gorgeous visuals and beautiful animation. They're gonna be known as the developer who primarily makes those, in the same manner that Telltale is well known for making narrative-driven games. It's not just that Naughty Dog will make more Last of Us, it's also a Last of Us that will be incredibly polarizing. The actor who played Joel, Troy Baker, commented on how you should approach the game with an open mind. It's not just that, but players who are gonna play the game also need to be able to challenge their own ideas about the game, the world, the characters, everything. Oh, and he also said that the game would be an amazing story and that you will not be ambivalent about it, but that's not gonna reassure us about the part where we have to open our mind and challenge our expectations. Now, being a one-trick phony isn't really an issue. Ubisoft mostly makes sandbox games these days, but Ubisoft's issue is more in the fact that the games that they make are turning more and more into a 5-month-old leftover dinner on a forgotten garbage bin. Naughty Dog's issue is the fact that the developers overwork themselves to make something that can either turn into a magnum opus for the ages or a 5-month-old leftover dinner on a forgotten garbage bin, or maybe even something in between. We don't really know for sure. What we do know is that based on the many reports that we're seeing, Naughty Dog did overwork their employees. Naughty Dog did overwork the animation team to the point where some of them are straight up hospitalized. It's to the point where they almost, and I mean almost, withheld the final paycheck of a former staff until he signed additional paperwork stating that he wouldn't share their production practices. Let me repeat that. They almost didn't pay an employee unless if that employee signed a paper saying that he shouldn't say anything about their production practices. Imagine how bad the crunch that happens in Naughty Dog that they thought that that was a good idea. So with all of the horror stories surrounding Naughty Dog's working environment, is it really a surprise that some of the disgruntled employees took matters to their own hands and leak a good portion of the game's content? Are all of those going to be enough for the general audiences to be deterred in their purchase over The Last of Us Part II? I genuinely don't think so, at least for the most mainstream audiences out there who don't pay attention to the news. I don't think that the mainstream gamers who are only in it to play video games are gonna care about the inner workings of a company who overworked their employees. As long as they got their fix of their narrative-driven and cinematic award-bait video games, they're not gonna be complaining because they're gamers, not activists. They're gamers who want to enjoy a product, not to make a statement against the power. And once again, that's the sad truth of the entire situation. If game developers want to complain about being overworked, it's a problem that they have to deal with themselves. Unfortunately, I am no expert. I could perhaps suggest a way to regulate the upper management in regards to scheduling or improve the quality of the workplace, but I'm not well versed on this matter, and neither do a lot of people who play video games, unless if they've been working on a similar industry. There's really no good answer or even actions from the consumer side that can truly fix the nightmare that is working on game development. So considering that the leaker is doing a lot of this due to them being resentful against Naughty Dog, do you think that the leaker is in the right in regards to the situation? This is still under debate actually. In normal circumstances where game development suffers from little to no issues, leaks from disgruntled employees might come with a lot of scrutiny. But considering the terrible workplace that Naughty Dog has, it is quite difficult to be sympathetic towards them, the company who has made tons and tons of critically acclaimed video games to the point where there are fanboys who would defend them, even go so far as to defend their terrible working condition. Depending on who you ask, the leaker might be the hero of the story or the villain of the story, and both perspectives have merits. The leaker is a hero for standing up against the establishment who has treated them and many other employees terribly, a retaliation so effective that the developers have to announce that the game is going to be released this June, whereas previously the game got delayed indefinitely relate things to current events. On the other hand, the leaker is a villain for ruining so many people's enjoyment. They ruin the enjoyment of the people who want to play the game because the internet keeps on spreading the spoilers and even some funny memes surrounding it. They also ruin all the hard work of the passionate developers who are genuinely happy and want to see people to praise their work, if those kinds of people even exist at all in the office. Personally, I don't care either way. The fact of the matter is, this leak happened and it's very likely that it's caused by the terrible working conditions, an issue that has been plaguing game companies for years that they haven't fixed and we have no power to fix. This should be a cautionary tale for all of those developers and publishers out there. Those employees are people too. The moment you assign them the task to develop these video games is the moment where you give them power, no matter how small it can get. And if they are unhappy with your direction, or if they are unhappy with the working conditions of your company, they will retaliate. They will leak out all of that information, and some of them probably wouldn't care about the ramification that will come to them. Heck, some might even want Naughty Dog to pursue legal means to them, because at least that would give them more attention and publicity. Hopefully through this story, game developers and publishers can learn about how much power that their employees might have over the development of their game. Hopefully this should be a warning to all the future game developers or publishers out there to never ever mess with the people who built their foundation. You give them a nightmarish working condition and they might give you an equally nightmarish PR, one that will bite you sooner or later. Whether or not you're a fan of the game, a hater of the game, or indifferent to the game, we can at least agree that Naughty Dog has a lot of trouble that needs fixing.